Today is episode 9 with Dr. B.
Welcome to the Harness Your ADHD Power podcast. If you're looking for a fresh perspective and actionable steps on hot topics from focus to follow through to self-management and more, you are in the right place. Welcome your host, innovative educator, coach, and psychotherapist, Dr. B.
Hey, ADDers, I'm so glad that you could join me for today's podcast episode. Today's episode was inspired by a question that I received from a listener in Washington State. Does ADD affect personal relationships like dating? And if so, how? I've been unsuccessful in the dating realm, and I'm wondering how that may be playing a part. You know, the short answer to your question is yes. And I look to shed some light on how it does and what you can do to increase your dating success. How much time do we have? Not much. So let's get to it. For those of you who have been dating unsuccessfully, perhaps today's stories will help clear up some of your frustration and get you restarted on a more successful dating journey. It's important to note that the primary symptoms of ADHD, inattentiveness, hyperactivity, and impulsivity, can sabotage your best efforts and your best intentions, depending on how they're expressed in your life, just as well as the low self-esteem, lack of confidence, self-doubt, depression, anxiety, poor decision-making, lack of follow-through, and boredom that often accompanies a lifetime of poorly managed or misunderstood ADHD. Remembering that your brain is wired differently than the non-ADHD brains of the world, and that isn't a bad thing, can go a long way to helping make sense out of many life experiences that you've had, as well as knowing what it is that you're going to need to do in your future ones. I don't think that there are any classes in school about dating, and certainly not about dating and ADHD. You know, I remember a few classes about things other than academics, but nothing about the basics of relationships, such as understanding who would be a good match for me, and how do I meet them, and what do I do once I meet them to get to know them well enough to determine if we have a promising future together. You know, if you, like so many other adults, didn't receive any guidelines or training for these stages of dating and relationships, and your criteria is simply tall, dark, and handsome, or sexy, sassy, and fun, you're really missing a lot of important ingredients for a successful dating experience. No, seriously, a significant relationship influences the quality and the course of your life for as long as you're in it, and you want to get this right to the best of your ability. Let's take a look at what not getting it right looks like for any number of reasons. Many very short-term relationships, choosing emotionally unavailable partners, settling for poor qualities such as deception about being single or problems with substance abuse, self-sabotage with potential relationships, or unrealistic expectations. If the goal is to successfully date in order to get married and have kids, you need a focused and committed approach with criteria and strategies so you can achieve your desired outcome. I've generated 3 stories and action steps based on the question and the following additional information shared by the Washington State listener. My goal was to always get married and have kids, but when I started to hit my 30s, I became less and less confident that I would meet Mr. Right. My dating was always sporadic and always conflicted with the traditional Christian values, but often found myself making more and more exceptions to those values and have adjusted them since then. I have recognized that my low self-esteem and nurturing personality to help others has led to the emotional, unavailable men with huge problems of their own, such as substance abuse, PTSD, rebounding from divorce, and separated. I would pour all of my support and availability into these guys, probably with the hope that I would win them forever. Maturity has helped me to recognize the mistakes that I made in the past, but still lacking the confidence in myself, that I'm worth more. I dabble in online dating most often, and I meet guys out at bars every now and then, but still have been unsuccessful in meeting anyone with true substance. I've recognized that what I've been previously doing isn't working, but I can't muster up the course to take a new approach. I've not completely given up on love and would like to know what on the ADD, depression, anxiety side of the house might be hindering me in these relationships and possible relationships. Thank you so much for what you've shared so openly with me. As I do in the Ask Dr. B episodes, what jumps out at me from what you've shared is sporadic dating, not if you want something that's important to you. Dabbling in online dating, no dabbling if the goal is important. Meeting men at bars occasionally, not unless you want a bar man. Values conflict, a must to get straight so that you eliminate internal conflict. Low self-esteem must be resolved, or it will only get in the way of what you feel that you're worth, not what you truly deserve. And codependent behaviors and thinking, needing to be needed by others and ignoring your own needs that need to be met, trying to get them met through someone other than yourself. Circling back to the goal, which is to meet a man of substance, get married, and have kids. Clearly, the approach up to now reflects the ADD, depression, anxiety side of the house that our listener asks about. Now, this may not be your story, or it may. However, if you're dating unsuccessfully, then today's 3 stories should be relevant. Any one of the primary symptoms of ADHD, inattentiveness, hyperactivity, impulsivity, and the common traveling companions of depression, anxiety, addictions, low self-esteem, lack of confidence, self-doubt, poor decision-making, and boredom could single-handedly contribute to the lack of successful dating. And the more conditions occurring at the same time, the higher the probability of unsuccessful dating. I'll say more about that in today's stories. And if any of you are going off on a tangent right now with, well, then what's the point of dating if I have one or more of these conditions going on? The point is that they are only a problem when they're left unaddressed to play out their sabotage. When addressed, low self-esteem becomes healthy self-esteem. Lack of confidence becomes confidence. Self-doubt becomes certainty. Poor decision-making becomes knowing the reasons that decisions are made and making good ones. And boredom becomes a thing of the past, replaced by being fully engaged with life. If you leave the limitations and the saboteurs unresolved, they will play out in your dating experiences and relationships as an expression or a mirroring of your issues in need of your attention. In other words, if your self-esteem, which is your self-value or your self-love, is low, and you don't believe that you deserve what you're going for, then you won't get it because you've instructed your mind that you don't deserve it and you shouldn't receive it. Pretty clear instructions. Let's look at this from another point of view. To get what you want, you need to know what that is. And to get it from people that you want it from, you need to know that they want what you want, and they want it with you, that they have it to give you, and that you have what they want. And once you've handled these preliminaries, you need to know how to engage, sustain, and shape it into what you and the other person both envision. Every relationship, including your relationship with yourself, requires maintenance, which costs you time, effort, and energy. So the closer to the ideal of what you're seeking and who you need to be to have that, the less sabotage and interference you'll get, and the more time, effort, and energy that you'll have to put into enjoying a great relationship with yourself and another person. As I've said so many times before, I'm a work in progress just like you. The relationships that I chose earlier in my life were not based on any of what I'm sharing with you today. If they had been, the outcomes would have been quite different. And since I wasn't born knowing how to make the decisions and choices I now know how to do to make the most of my gifts and quiet my challenges, and neither were you, so long as you are teachable, you can learn just like I did. We're getting closer to the 3 important points with relevant stories, an action step, and a favorite quote of mine. So let's keep going. In this episode, I want to help you to get out of frustration and disappointment and fill in the information that you may have been missing that has been sabotaging your best efforts. And knowing is only the first step. The next step is taking action on what you know to get new results. So please, don't let yourself off the hook here. Today's 3 important points are how to determine your criteria for the right partner for you and whether or not you would be the right partner for them. How to stick to your criteria and not settle or choose again just because your hormones or impulsivity gets triggered. And how to sustain an interesting and engaging dating relationship that grows and gives you the information you need to know whether or not to continue on.
This podcast is sponsored by Pure Potential with Dr. B. You can head over to drbarbaracohen.com and find the podcast show notes, great free content from Dr. B, plus programs and services. That's drbarbaracohen.com.
Now back to being an adult with ADHD in today's world. And just in case you go feeling like this is going to be so much work and that I'm taking all the fun out of dating, consider all the time that you may have already spent dating unsuccessfully and that what you're currently doing just isn't working. Do you really want to continue doing what's not working and spend even more of your lifetime on an ineffective approach? I hope not. I want you to remember that you are not what you do or don't do. You are more than that. We are not defective or less than as people, as human beings. We're just wired differently. And hence, we need a different understanding, approach, follow through, and engagement than others. New relationships are typically exciting, and most people pour a lot of their energy into the relationship in the beginning. Do you know how to sustain the feeling of excitement so that you don't end up bored and on to the next person time and time again? It's my hope that you learn some of that here. It's almost story time, but first, you need a win. You need to remember and acknowledge and celebrate at least one thing that is good about you or has gone right for you today. Just one thing. Perhaps it's your first better grade on a school exam, or your sense of humor that's offbeat yet engaging, or you spent time with yourself and you actually enjoyed it, or you went to sleep at the time you said that you would and you woke up feeling great. Whatever you choose is up to you. However, I want you to choose something right now and celebrate it, either aloud or to yourself. I want you to have a win and acknowledge that at least one thing has gone right in your day and is right about you, even if you're frustrated about dating and even feeling a little hopeless that it can ever get better for you. Those facts do not take away from the fact that at least one thing has gone right today and is right about you. You are a precious child of the universe and are called a human being, not a human doing, for good reason. You don't have to earn your self-esteem or self-value. You were born with it. Got it? Good. So now let's shift to our first story. Ruth was in her early 20s and was really hoping that she would meet Mr. Right, get married, and have kids. She didn't really have a plan for how she was going to meet him or any criteria for who he was. She was just hoping or dreaming about meeting him because that's what she thought that you do. When she turned 30, she started to lose faith that she would ever meet him. After all, it had been 10 years of hoping that she would, and that seemed like a reasonable amount of time to have met him, if she was going to. She had certain values that were important to her that she had hoped he would have too. But because she wasn't meeting men with those values, She thought that perhaps she was being too strict or limiting herself by setting such firm boundaries and values. So she adjusted those values to who she was meeting, and that did not work out well at all. She was not meeting men that were good for her, one bit. Ruth had lunch with her good friend Mona and shared her disappointment about her single status and what she'd been doing for the past 10 years. Mona looked at Ruth in utter bewilderment, wondering why she was disappointed when it didn't sound like she could have met Mr. Right in her 20s at all. In fact, she shared that with Ruth. Ruth was confused by Mona's comment. Wasn't dating sporadically what most people did? Mona said, no, not if you're dating with intention and purpose. Mona offered to take Ruth through a process that she had been taught in a workshop. Even though Mona wasn't yet in a relationship of her dreams, she told Ruth that she'd been dating many qualified men and was getting closer to meeting the right man for her. Ruth asked her about the term she used, qualified men. Mona was excited to share with her friend. Qualified men are men who meet my criteria. I have negotiable and non-negotiable criteria for what I'm seeking in a man and a relationship. A couple of my non-negotiable criteria are he doesn't smoke or drink, which means I wouldn't be meeting him in a bar. A few more non-negotiables are he wants children, is established and solid in his career, is of the same faith as me, and lives a life of personal growth and transformation. Mona continued, a few of my negotiable criteria are his food preferences, his taste in movies, the types of places that he likes to vacation, and the music he enjoys listening to. These aren't deal breakers for me, but the non-negotiables are, if they don't exist. Ruth was stunned. She had never heard of having non-negotiables and negotiables about a man and a relationship before she would even accept a date with someone. If she was attracted to him and he seemed interesting and nice, she would say yes and see how it went. Again, she had no criteria to measure if she should have said yes or how it went. She just went with the flow. Are you relating to Ruth? Dating can be casual and an adventure with no set goals other than to have fun and meet interesting people. And there's nothing wrong with that. However, that type of dating is very different than dating with intention, the intention of marriage and kids. Deciding to embark on intentional dating requires criteria and a plan of action. Knowing the details and timeline can be very important to your success. Your criteria serves many purposes. It helps to paint a tangible picture of what you do and don't want, and what you will and won't budge on. When you make a list of your negotiables and non-negotiables, instead of just keeping them inside your head, you make them real. You get to imagine your life with someone who meets your list of criteria. And as you're imagining your life with someone you want, you need to focus on imagining if you are someone who they would want to be with, too. In other words, do you have the qualities or criteria that he would be seeking if he were the person you are seeking? If no, are you interested in becoming that person? Are you able to become that person and still like who you are? And if you become that person, would the criteria that you listed for him still apply? Have you ever approached your dating with a set of criteria before? Transitioning to our next story. Samantha's story picks up where Ruth's left off. Her codependent behaviors were ruining her life and removing any possibility of healthy relationships. The men that she was meeting were all perfect partners for the outstanding issues she needed to address in her own life. Her self-esteem came from giving to others, and she had the belief that if she just gave enough to the men that she was meeting, they would certainly see she was a wonderful woman, and they would want to be with her. In fact, they did see that she was a wonderful woman for them to use to get their needs met, and give nothing in return that she was seeking, or certainly very little. They could see how desperate she was for a relationship and love, so they could lie to her, be abusive to her, and then do something nice for her periodically, and she would excuse all the ills and stay with them. And every time she thought of ending the relationship, they would do something meaningful for her, and she stayed. This is called intermittent reinforcement, and it is the most addictive, which is what Samantha was experiencing. It's like the gambler. They know that the win is there because they've experienced it before. They believe that they just have to keep going, and it will come in time. With this belief, the gambler could end up broke. And with the intermittent reinforcement in a relationship, you could end up with a broken heart or spending your entire lifetime with someone who only gives you what you need or want occasionally, and you keep looking for what you did to get them to give it to you instead of looking at the bigger picture of the relationship and its issues. Samantha could feel that there was something that was wrong, but she just couldn't put her finger on it because she really didn't understand codependency well enough. She had a need to be needed by others to validate herself and her worth. Codependency is an absence of a healthy relationship with yourself, where you sacrifice meeting your needs and meet the needs of others instead. There's no happiness in this kind of dating or relationship, and it only further fueled Samantha's depression or sad feelings about herself. What we say or think the problems are rarely end up being what the real problems or challenges are. And without getting to the real problem, it's hard to have a real solution instead of a Band-Aid. Samantha had the belief that if she just poured all of her love into the man and a relationship, that certainly the man would be grateful for her love and love her in return. Instead, what she got was an absence of the love that she was seeking because the men she selected didn't have the same belief as Samantha. They didn't believe in the reciprocity of giving and receiving. Giving her all made Samantha feel good, which helped with her depression temporarily. However, when there was nothing much coming back to her, she sank further into her depression. Everything took longer and was harder when she was depressed, yet she kept repeating this cycle and perpetuating these feelings. In a depressive state, your affect or your emotional thermometer might be kind of flat and unexpressive. That state doesn't typically draw people to you, nor do you actively seek them out. It's more of a time of withdrawing into yourself in a negative way. If you've been depressed over your failed dating experiences, is it because you've chosen relationships based on intermittent reinforcement of receiving occasional perks and telling yourself that's enough? If that's the case, I hope it's time for that to stop. Transitioning to our next story. Helen had low self-esteem for as long as she could remember. She grew up in a family of 5 kids, and she was the middle or the third child. She always heard that her brothers and sisters were smarter and faster and more accomplished than her, which is why she always pushed herself to achieve more so that she would receive some of the recognition too. She worked hard in school, worked hard at her jobs, always doing more than was asked of her, yet never feeling that she was doing enough or good enough. In fact, she didn't feel much better about herself than she did as a young child because she wasn't getting the acknowledgement that others got. She wondered what it was going to take for her to truly feel that she was worthy of good things happening for her. She was already pouring her heart and soul into everything that she did, and if her best wasn't good enough, then what was she to do? Since Helen wasn't finding the acknowledgement in her academic or work life, she thought she might find it in her dating life, her love life. But since she didn't think much of herself, she had a hard time putting herself out there. She only dabbled in online dating, and she accepted dates to meet men at bars, even though this was not the kind of man she truly wanted to be with. She wanted to meet someone of true substance, but her low self-esteem wouldn't allow her to think that she was worthy of such a man. Since she perceived herself as broken or less than on some level, she was only connecting with men who were less than what she was seeking or broken down in some way. In a way, they were perfect for Helen because she could pour herself into them and their life in the hopes of fixing what was broken or wrong with them, and they would be grateful to her and love her and want to be with her. This is what her mind told her, how wrong she was. Her self-value was that she only deserved a little of what would make her happy. That who was she to think that she deserved to get everything she wanted when others don't? That it was selfish or arrogant of her to think that she was better than others, better than her mother or her father, who didn't get what they actually wanted, but they settled for what they did get and made the best of it. This was her model for marriage. And she didn't see anyone having the courage to go for what they really wanted and actually get it. So little by little, she was giving up on her dreams without ever having done what she needed to have a good shot at reaching them. She didn't have the courage either. Helen also suffered from depression and anxiety. She got nervous in social situations and didn't have much enthusiasm or energy or vitality about her. This wasn't very attractive, despite the fact that Helen herself was quite attractive. It is difficult to try a different approach when you aren't clear on all the details or criteria or structure of the process of more successful dating. You can't pour all of your love and attention into another person when your relationship with yourself is lacking and suffering. A relationship where you think so little of yourself is not a recipe for a successful relationship or meeting a person of substance. It bears asking the question, what would a person of substance want with someone who doesn't think much of themselves, nor think that they deserve much in life or from others? They wouldn't. And so you wouldn't get what you're seeking until you turn your eyes onto yourself and attend to your low self-esteem. If you were to pour everything into yourself that you've been pouring into others, both in your work and your personal life, you would be amazed before long that you would have an extraordinary relationship with yourself and have cultivated a deep and abiding love for yourself. With this securely established, you would sketch out your criteria and stick to them without choosing again or backing down from your standards, and only look at those men who meet that criteria. The pool might be smaller, but it's the right pool to be swimming in. The way to remove the impact of ADD, depression, anxiety from interfering with dating and successful relationships is to address the issues that each condition presents in the person living with it. Some action steps. It is your responsibility to get the information and training you need. In other words, your ability to respond to your needs and meet them. So if you're like Ruth and you've never thought about and then written out your criteria for a dating relationship leading to marriage, your action step has 3 parts. Focus. What are your non-negotiables? What are your negotiables? How much time are you giving yourself to date, to meet the right person, and get married? Follow through. Make a plan to date only men who meet your criteria. Please be clear on knowing that you will say no to an offer that does not meet your criteria. And self-management. Know that you need to address whatever issues from ADD, depression, anxiety, self-doubt, self-esteem in order to be fully available to meet the person that you want to meet. And that you have to be the person who can meet him and connect with him and build a relationship with him. So if you're not there yet, get to work on becoming that person first. If you're like Samantha and you need to be needed by others and fall prey to intermittent reinforcement, your action step has 3 parts. Focus first on developing a healthy relationship with yourself and give yourself the love that you're seeking from others. Pay attention to intermittent reinforcement traps. Follow through and be sure to schedule meeting your own needs daily so that you don't go without and become needy of others. And in self-management, take time to discover what fills you and be sure to get plenty of it. Halt, hungry, angry, lonely, tired is altogether a recipe for self-medicating, not self-management. Take care of your needs rather than expecting others to do so. What they give is a bonus. And if you're like Helen and you don't have a healthy model for dating, relationships, and marriage, your action step has 3 parts. Focus. Since it's your life, what do you want your dating experiences and marriage life to look like and be like? Follow through. Set up time and allow yourself to imagine having that life now and how it makes you feel. Is there any resistance, or are they all good feelings? Take note of what it is that you experience and notice. And self-management. Be sure to respond to the negative self-talk when self-doubt or low self-esteem arises, rather than just allowing your mind to tell you negative stories that you just live with them. Let your mind know that you used to believe that and feel that way, but not anymore. You now know that you are worthy. And for all my male listeners today, yes, I know that all the stories were about women seeking men, but you just flip it around because the same principles apply no matter who it is that you're looking for as a partner. A favorite quote of mine. Henry David Thoreau wrote, "Life is not measured by the breaths we take, but by the moments that take our breath away." The question I have for you at this point of our journey together is, what are the moments that have taken your breath away? I appreciate you showing up to listen today and in the future. New episodes will be available twice a week now, Mondays for this format and Thursdays for the Ask Dr. B format. I'll be talking about such compelling topics as analysis paralysis, organic organization, making friends, and more hot topics, as well as lining up guests to bring more great insights to you. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast and keep coming back. In fact, if you received value today, please rate the show and leave a thoughtful review on iTunes so that I know that I'm meeting your needs. It means a lot to me to know that your life is getting a little bit better every time that we get together. And then make sure to get over to my website to get your show notes and learn more about other services. That is, if that's of interest to you. Until the next time, bye for now.
Thanks for your undivided attention. If you're hungry to make positive changes in your life, head over to drbarbaracohen.com and see how Dr. B can help you today. Whether you love making changes with one-to-one attention and community support, or on your own with self-study, or could benefit from coaching or psychotherapy, you'll find all the information right there at drbarbaracohen.com.